Welcome to this explainer. Have you ever really stopped to think about what it takes just to stay alive? Think of a living organism, even yourself, sitting right there, right now. Don't just think of it as a creature, but as a bustling, incredibly complex factory. And this factory, it operates 24/7. It never clocks out. It requires constant, unbelievably precise maintenance just to keep the walls from caving in. Today, we're going to explore the mechanics of life. We'll be directly unpacking the fundamental biological processes that keep this factory running and prevent our eventual breakdown. It's kind of mind-blowing when you really get into it.
But before we really get into the weeds, we got to start with a seemingly simple yet, honestly, deeply philosophical question. How do we actually tell the difference between what is alive and what is not? I mean, if we see a dog running around or a cow chewing its cud, it's obvious, right? They're moving. But what if that dog or cow is fast asleep? Or what about a plant? A plant doesn't visibly grow or move from day to day, but we still intuitively know it's alive. So the absolute crucial point here is that visible movement simply isn't enough of a defining characteristic to tell us if something is alive.
And this is exactly why visible movement doesn't cut it. Life is actually defined by invisible molecular movements. You see, living organisms are these highly ordered structures. We're talking tissues, cells, and even smaller microscopic components. But because of the environment, this beautifully organized structure is constantly under threat of breaking down over time. It's like entropy. If that order breaks down entirely, the organism dies. It's that simple. Therefore, living creatures must actively, continuously repair and maintain their structures by moving molecules around behind the scenes. So to wrap our heads around how we combat this constant, relentless threat of breakdown, here is our roadmap for today. We'll start by defining life and maintenance, then move on to nutrition, fueling the organism, respiration, releasing the energy, transportation, moving materials, and finally, excretion, removing body waste.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Defining Life and Maintenance.
So, laying out the foundational terminology for our biological factory here, life processes are defined as the continuous maintenance functions of living organisms that must go on even when they aren't doing anything in particular. Seriously, even when you're just sitting there watching this explainer or completely knocked out sleeping in your bed, this maintenance job has to continue to prevent damage and breakdown. And here's the catch: repairing things takes energy. Because this energy must come from outside the body of the individual organism, there absolutely has to be a process to transfer that energy source, which we basically call food, into the body.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 2, Nutrition, Fueling the Organism.
Nutrition is simply the process of taking in the raw, carbon-based materials needed for energy and growth. Depending on the complexity of the organism, this happens in some wildly different ways. Just look at the stark contrast between autotrophic and heterotrophic nutrition. Autotrophs, like plants and certain bacteria, they are basically the ultimate DIYers. They can synthesize their own complex carbohydrates from super simple inorganic molecules, specifically carbon dioxide and water, just by using sunlight. Heterotrophs, on the other hand, that's us, animals, fungi. We cannot do this. We depend either directly or indirectly on consuming those complex, pre-made structures created by the autotrophs. We gotta steal their hard work.
For those autotrophs, this magic happens through photosynthesis. And what's really interesting is the exact three-step sequence of how they pull this off. Step 1. Chlorophyll absorbs light energy. Step 2. That light energy is converted to chemical energy, which literally splits water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. Step 3. Carbon dioxide is reduced to carbohydrates. But wait, here's a mind-blowing fact. These steps don't always have to happen back to back. Consider desert plants. They've got this fascinating evolutionary adaptation where they take up carbon dioxide at night to prepare an intermediate chemical. Then, that chemical is acted upon by the sunlight energy they absorb the following day. It's an absolutely brilliant way for them to prevent water loss in the scorching heat.
Okay, now let's shift gears over to human heterotrophic nutrition. When we eat, food travels down our highly coiled alimentary canal to be systematically broken down. And here's a fun little aside for you. The length of this small intestine actually differs pretty significantly among animals. Herbivores that eat grass, they need a much longer intestine to digest that super tough cellulose. But carnivores, they have shorter ones, simply because meat is way easier to digest.
Now, as that food travels through this canal, a highly coordinated chemical breakdown occurs. It's like an assembly line in reverse. Saliva, which contains amylase, starts by breaking down complex starches right in your mouth. Down in the stomach, a highly acidic environment allows the enzyme pepsin to start digesting proteins. Then, the liver jumps in and secretes bile salts. These salts emulsify large fat globules. Basically, they break them down exactly like soap acts on dirt when you're washing your hands, which maximizes the efficiency of our digestive enzymes. Finally, pancreatic enzymes like trypsin, alongside intestinal juices, wrap up the whole shebang. They finalize the conversion of food into simple amino acids, glucose, and fatty acids that our bodies can actually absorb.
Let's move on to Section 3, respiration, releasing the energy.
Okay, so the food is broken down and it's absorbed. Great, but the factory can't actually use it yet. The cells must extract that stored energy. Now, all respiratory pathways start out in the cell cytoplasm by taking a 6-carbon glucose molecule and snapping it into a 3-carbon molecule called pyruvate. From there, it splits into 2 possible paths. If oxygen is present, which we call aerobic respiration, the pyruvate goes straight into the mitochondria and is completely broken down into carbon dioxide and water. But if oxygen is absent, that's anaerobic respiration, the pyruvate is converted into things like ethanol and carbon dioxide. This is exactly what happens during fermentation in yeast, for example. So what's the whole point of this elaborate process? The entire goal of respiration is to synthesize ATP. Think of ATP as the actual, literal, cellular energy currency. It is the cash used to fuel all other endothermic, meaning energy-requiring reactions in the cell. And the crucial takeaway you need to remember here is that aerobic respiration, the one using oxygen, yields a significantly larger amount of this ATP payout than the anaerobic pathway does. It's just way more efficient.
All right, let's hit Section 4, transportation, moving materials.
So now we face a massive logistical problem. We've successfully extracted nutrients, and we've got oxygen sitting in our lungs. But how do these vital resources navigate a huge, complex body to reach every single cell that needs them? Consider this absolutely astonishing fact from the textbook. If simple diffusion, just the natural, passive spreading out of molecules, were our only transport method, it would take 3 years for a single molecule of oxygen to reach your toes from your lungs. 3 whole years. I mean, no way, right? This perfectly illustrates why simple diffusion is entirely insufficient for large, complex organisms like us. We need a much, much faster highway system.
And for humans, that high-speed highway system is our circulatory system. It consists of a specialized fluid connective tissue we all know, blood. The liquid part, the plasma, transports dissolved food, carbon dioxide, and waste. The red blood corpuscles rely on a pigment called hemoglobin to grab oxygen from the lungs and carry it really quickly. We then use the heart as a central, tireless pumping organ to aggressively push these fluids through a massive, intricate network of blood vessels. This ensures absolutely no cell has to wait 3 years just to take a breath of air.
Now, highly organized plants, they also need transportation, but they solve this logistical nightmare a bit differently. They have specialized vascular tissues. Xylem tissue acts like a series of heavy-duty pipes to transport water and minerals that are pulled up from the soil via the roots. Phloem tissue, on the flip side, is in charge of distributing the food, the sweet products of photosynthesis, synthesized way up in the leaves, driving it all the way down to the rest of the plant.
And that brings us to our final stop, Section 5, excretion, removing body waste.
As anyone who has ever run a factory knows, all this nonstop production generates waste. All of these metabolic activities we've been discussing generate toxic byproducts that absolutely must be removed. Excretion is the biological process of removing those harmful metabolic wastes from the body. Specifically, our bodies generate highly toxic, soluble nitrogenous compounds. If we didn't have a dedicated system to get rid of this stuff, these nitrogen wastes would rapidly pile up and fatally disrupt that delicate internal molecular order we talked about at the very beginning of this explainer. It would be game over.
In humans, this crucial cleanup job primarily falls to the kidneys, which act as the body's filtration plant. Tucked inside the kidneys are these tiny basic structural filtration units called nephrons. They meticulously filter the blood, separating the toxic nitrogenous waste and expelling it as urine. Plants, of course, also generate waste, but they handle it via some pretty diverse mechanisms. Sometimes they just store waste in leaves that eventually fall off, literally dropping their trash, or they secrete it out as gums and resins.
So, we've seen how incredibly complex and vital all these internal maintenance processes are. It's a miracle it all works so smoothly. But what happens when they inevitably fail due to severe disease or sudden injury? This actually brings us to the powerful reality of organ donation. Common transplantations, kidneys, hearts, livers, lungs, they can literally save a life when a recipient's internal factory just completely shuts down. It leaves you wondering, doesn't it? Considering the absolute fragility of these microscopic life processes, isn't the ability of modern medicine to seamlessly transfer these living, working components from one human to another just the ultimate biological gift? What a profound testament to the mechanics of life. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. I really hope you walk away with a newfound appreciation for the amazing, bustling factory that is you.